Imagine dedicating your entire life to building a secure future, only for a charming stranger to shatter your retirement dreams and leave you with nothing. But what if, years later, fate hands you the ultimate chance to deliver a cold, calculating, and perfectly legal revenge? This is the story of how I brought down the man who destroyed my parents' lives, leading to a downfall so complete, it's almost unbelievable. Right at that moment when my parents should have been enjoying the golden years they had worked so hard to earn, they made a decision that would turn their retirement dreams into a financial nightmare. Though none of us could have predicted that the charming salesman at their door would become the architect of both their destruction and, 12 years later, his own complete downfall. In 2007, both my parents reached the milestone they had been planning for their entire working lives: retirement with financial security and the freedom to finally enjoy the fruits of decades of careful saving and responsible planning. My father was a former Army man who had served his country with pride, completing his national service and staying for an additional 8 years with the Royal Engineers before transitioning into civilian engineering and maintenance work. My mother had dedicated her career to education as a teacher, and together they had built a solid financial foundation through multiple pension plans and disciplined saving habits that put them in an enviable position. When their retirement became official, they received substantial cash lump sum payments and were looking forward to decent pension income that would sustain them comfortably for the rest of their lives. In fact, their individual pension incomes were actually higher than my entire salary at the time, which gave them both the confidence and the resources to tackle a project they had been dreaming about for years: completely renovating their family home to create the perfect retirement sanctuary. The renovation project was ambitious but well-planned, involving new windows throughout the house, some minor structural building work, a complete kitchen overhaul, and a beautiful block-paved driveway that would enhance both the functionality and curb appeal of their property. Understanding that this was a significant investment that needed to be done right, my parents took the responsible approach of getting multiple quotes from different contractors and thoroughly researching each company's reputation, credentials, and track record. I helped them with the research process, and we spent weeks gathering information, checking references, and comparing not just prices but the quality of work and professionalism of each potential contractor. After careful consideration, they decided to go with a local company that I'll call Bad Company, and their decision seemed completely logical and well-informed at the time. Bad Company presented themselves as the perfect choice for several compelling reasons. They had membership in all the relevant professional trade organizations, their online reviews and references checked out positively, and most importantly, they weren't the cheapest option, which their sales representative explained was actually a good thing. The salesman took the time to educate my parents about why the lowest bid isn't always the best value, explaining how quality materials, proper installation techniques, and comprehensive warranties justified spending a bit more upfront to avoid problems down the road. The total project cost was agreed upon at £35,000, which represented a significant portion of my parents' retirement funds but was well within their budget and seemed reasonable for the scope of work involved. They paid the standard 10% deposit to secure their place in the company's schedule, and the work began exactly as promised. Everything started smoothly and professionally. The workers showed up on time, the project progressed according to schedule, and remarkably, Bad Company didn't ask for a single additional payment until the entire renovation was completely finished. There were a couple of minor snags along the way that were quickly and easily corrected, and the final cost came in just £500 over the original estimate due to some drainage issues that had been mentioned as a possibility from the beginning. When my parents looked at their beautifully renovated home, they thought they had made the perfect choice and that their retirement dreams were finally becoming reality, but they had no idea that their nightmare was just beginning. But the tragedy has not stopped yet, because within weeks of the contractors finishing their work and driving away with my parents' hard-earned retirement money, the beautiful renovation began revealing itself as a catastrophic scam that would cost them nearly twice what they had already paid and turn their dream home into a dangerous, uninhabitable nightmare. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came with the very next rainstorm. The brand new windows that were supposed to provide better insulation and weather protection had massive gaps in their frames that allowed water to pour directly into the house whenever it rained. Even worse, you could actually hear the wind whistling through these gaps on breezy days, creating an eerie soundtrack that reminded my parents constantly of how badly they had been cheated. Their heating bills immediately skyrocketed because the house was essentially trying to heat the entire outdoors through these poorly installed windows. Within just 1 month of completion, the beautiful block-paved driveway that was supposed to enhance their home's curb appeal began sprouting weeds and grass through the gaps between the blocks. This wasn't normal settling or minor maintenance. This was evidence that the foundation work had been done incorrectly, without proper preparation or weed barriers that any competent contractor would have installed as standard procedure. The kitchen renovation, which had been one of the most expensive parts of the project, quickly became a dangerous hazard zone. The electrical work was so poorly done that using both ovens and the stovetop at the same time would blow the circuit breakers, and touching the metal plate around the light switch would deliver an electric shock that could have seriously injured my elderly parents. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was potentially lethal, especially for people with heart conditions or other health issues that make electric shocks particularly dangerous. 3 months after the work was completed, the kitchen floor suddenly burst with water damage, revealing that the plumbing work had been done so poorly that pipes were failing behind the walls. The water damage ruined not just the flooring but also cabinets, appliances, and personal belongings that my parents had stored in the kitchen area. Perhaps most infuriatingly, the supposedly high security secured by design doors that were supposed to protect my parents from break-ins could literally be lifted right out of their frames even when they were locked. The keys they had been given weren't even the original keys for the locks, and they were so difficult to turn that my parents, who both suffered from arthritis in their hands, often couldn't lock or unlock their own doors without significant pain and struggle. The final insult came when we realized that most of the windows had been advertised as premium argon-filled units that would provide superior insulation. However, the seals had already blown, allowing regular air inside and creating condensation problems that made it obvious the windows were defective from the moment they were installed. When my father asked his friend Bob to estimate the cost of fixing all these problems, the news was devastating. Bob determined that correcting the now evident defects would cost nearly £20,000 because almost everything would have to be completely ripped out and redone from scratch. This meant my parents would end up paying over £50,000 total for work that should have cost $35,000 and been done right the first time. My father immediately contacted Bad Company to demand they return and fix their shoddy work. The representative they sent was not just unhelpful but actively hostile, arrogant, and dismissive of every legitimate complaint my parents raised. He blamed everything on the original builders of the house, wrote a report claiming that none of the defects were caused by their work, and insisted everything had been done according to current best practices. That very evening, as if the universe wanted to provide one final piece of evidence, one of the window frames literally fell out of its opening, crashing to the ground and proving beyond any doubt that my parents had been the victims of a massive construction scam. No one expected that 11 years later, while desperately searching for a job closer to my struggling mother after my father's unexpected death, fate would place me directly in the path of the man who had destroyed my parents' retirement dreams, setting up the most satisfying revenge story you've ever heard. By 2018, my life had been turned upside down by tragedy. My father had passed away quite unexpectedly in 2015, leaving my mother not only heartbroken but also struggling to manage on her own. While she was doing much better by 2018, I realized I needed to be closer to her than the grueling 2-hour commute to the next city that my current job required. The combination of long travel times, expensive transportation costs, and worry about my mother's well-being made it clear that I needed to find work closer to home. As luck would have it, a local kitchen manufacturing company that I'll call Local Kitchens was looking to expand their operations and needed an IT technician and developer. The position offered about $1,000 more per year than I was currently making. And even better, it would eliminate the $500 monthly I was spending on buses and trains to get to work. The math was simple. This job would give me more money, more time with my mother, and less stress about transportation. During the interview process, I liked what I heard about the company and the role, and they seemed impressed with my qualifications and experience. I was accepted for the position and felt genuinely excited about this new chapter in my career. However, throughout the entire interview process, I had this nagging feeling that I somehow knew the boss of Local Kitchens, though I couldn't quite place where I might have met him before. Having worked in factory environments previously, I arrived for my first day properly prepared with a high-visibility safety vest, steel-toed boots, and my own ear protection equipment. I was shocked to discover that I was the only person in the entire facility wearing any personal protective equipment. None of the other workers wore masks, safety goggles, or any other protective gear, despite working in an environment where industrial machinery ran constantly. When all the equipment was operating simultaneously, the factory floor generated a noise level of 105 decibels, which is well above the legal requirement for mandatory ear protection. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a serious health and safety violation that could cause permanent hearing damage to every employee working there. The boss, who I'll call John, seemed completely unconcerned about these safety issues and appeared to cut corners everywhere possible to save money. My assigned workstation was barely powerful enough to run the development software I needed for my job, let alone the complex CAD and CAM software required for kitchen design work. When the CPU fan died on my computer, John actually told me he couldn't afford to replace a simple cooling fan. A basic computer keyboard took 3 weeks to arrive after I requested it, and although we were supposedly paid on the 28th of each month, the paychecks often didn't appear in our bank accounts until 9 p.m. or later, usually only after John had spent the day chasing down people who owed him money. The job description had been misleading at best. Despite being hired as an IT technician, I found myself designing kitchens, something I knew nothing about but suddenly fell under my responsibilities. I was also expected to maintain factory machinery, drive a forklift without the required specialized license, and provide IT support for John's personal home computer equipment and mobile phones belonging to him, his wife, his children, and even his parents. Little did I know that this toxic workplace was just the tip of the iceberg, and that the man exploiting me and my coworkers was the same person who had financially devastated my family over a decade earlier, right at that moment when I thought John's workplace exploitation couldn't get any worse. The Christmas season brought revelations that would not only expose the true depth of his business failures but also unlock the shocking connection to my family's past that would transform my frustration into a burning desire for complete and total revenge. As Christmas approached, John announced that he would be giving everyone a bonus and paying us early for the holiday shutdown period. After months of dangerous working conditions, late paychecks, and being forced to work outside my job description, I was cautiously optimistic that maybe he was finally going to show some appreciation for his employees' hard work and dedication. The bonus turned out to be a $5 tub of assorted sweets for each employee. This wasn't just insulting, it was almost comically inappropriate. Bob, my father's old friend who worked in manufacturing, couldn't eat the candy because he has type 1 diabetes, and I couldn't eat it because of a severe sugar allergy. Bob, ever the gentleman, told me not to mention this to John because it was Christmas and the candy would at least be something my kids could enjoy. I ended up with 3 boxes of sweets because John had overordered and was trying to get rid of them. That same day, despite supposedly being an IT technician, I was assigned to chase down a delayed order with a supplier, purchase materials from another vendor, and supervise a contractor who was attempting to install new showroom units. John was nowhere to be found during any of these critical tasks but mysteriously appeared just as we were about to leave for the day. He asked Bob for a private conversation, and I headed home, assuming it was just routine business discussion. The next morning, Bob filled me in on what had actually happened during that 3-hour conversation that lasted until 7 p.m. John had asked Bob to invest $10,000 in the business for what he called a quick capital injection because winter was supposedly a slow season for kitchen sales. But there were several large orders in the pipeline that would bring in substantial revenue soon. Bob, with his decades of experience in the industry, had used this opportunity to confront John directly about the company's shady business practices, poor management decisions, and complete disregard for employee safety and well-being. Bob told John that he could walk out of the job immediately and be earning double his current salary before the end of the year, which was absolutely true given his skills and reputation. Bob refused to invest and then dropped the first bombshell that would set everything in motion. He revealed that every single job they had completed for new clients was actually losing money. The company had been operating at a loss since mid-October, surviving only on credit and the cash flow from one remaining client. John was genuinely shocked when Bob explained that it cost him $200 per hour just to keep the business running, jumping to $300 when the machinery was operating. The day before our Christmas shutdown, John called me into the nearly completed showroom. I expected him to show me what needed to be finished or which kitchen units needed to be designed, but instead he delivered devastating news. He had finally worked out the company's finances and determined that there was only enough money to keep me employed for another couple of months. John even tried to make himself look generous by apologizing and claiming I was a good employee, but the income simply wasn't there to support my position. He wanted to give me time to find something else, he said. I felt my entire world crumble around me as I realized I was being discarded just when my mother needed me most. But just before I left that day, I overheard John making a phone call to order materials from a supplier. His exact words were burned into my memory. "Yes, it's John from Local Kitchens. You might have us down as bad company." In that single moment, all the pieces fell into place. And I finally understood why his face had seemed so familiar. He was the same man who had scammed my parents out of their life savings and destroyed their retirement dreams. But the tragedy has not stopped yet. Because discovering that my boss was the same scammer who had destroyed my parents' retirement dreams transformed my job termination from a personal setback into the beginning of the most methodical and devastating revenge campaign had ever orchestrated. One that would cost him everything he had built on the backs of his victims. The last day of work before Christmas arrived with John conveniently taking his family away for an extended holiday vacation. We were responsible for ensuring that the factory was properly powered down, locked off, and secured for the shutdown period. When no one else wanted to take on this responsibility, I volunteered, knowing that this would give me unrestricted access to the facility and all of John's business records. With only Bob and myself remaining in the factory, I began systematically gathering evidence and investigating John's finances. I already knew about the massive losses Bob had revealed, but digging deeper into the company's financial records, I discovered that Local Kitchens actually had no legitimate cash flow whatsoever. Everything was being operated on credit, loans, and borrowed money. Even more shocking was the discovery that John's personal assets were all entangled with the business finances. His house, his wife's Range Rover, his Jaguar, and several other expensive possessions were all registered as company assets, but they were financed through Local Kitchens' credit lines. The total debt was staggering, at least $750,000 in credit, loans, and mortgages that the failing business had no hope of ever repaying. Bob, who had been quietly investigating on his own, had discovered a treasure trove of evidence in John's filing system. Hidden away were complaint files from 2005 to 2008 containing dozens of customer complaints about shoddy workmanship, all under the name of Bad Company. The paperwork documented years of scamming customers, taking their money, and delivering substandard work that had to be completely redone by legitimate contractors. While it was too late to pursue legal action for those old complaints, Bob and I realized that we had the perfect opportunity to bring down John's current operation and ensure he could never scam anyone else again. Bob suggested that I spend the Christmas break researching health and safety regulations and then conduct thorough observations of the workplace violations when we returned in January. I spent January and February methodically documenting every single violation I could find. I took photographs, recorded videos, made detailed notes, and researched the specific legislation that John was breaking. By the end of February, I had compiled a thick folder containing evidence of numerous health and safety breaches, environmental violations, data protection failures, and illegal software usage. John was fully aware of the software licensing issues because I had sent him multiple emails explaining that he was breaking the law by using unlicensed software on multiple machines. His response was always the same dismissive attitude. As long as the software keeps running, it'll be okay. I had documented proof of his willful violation of intellectual property laws, along with evidence of my repeated attempts to get him to purchase proper licenses. My final day at Local Kitchens arrived, and I had already secured a much better development position through my recruiter contacts. Since my last day was Thursday, and my new job didn't start until Monday, I was looking forward to sleeping in on Friday and enjoying a long weekend. John was strangely absent throughout the entire day but appeared just as we were all leaving. He said absolutely nothing as he watched me pack up my personal belongings and leave the building. I got the distinct impression that he had expected me to stay until Friday, but he had specifically told me that my last day was the end of the month, not Friday. True to form, my final paycheck was late, not appearing in my account until 10 p.m., well after banking hours. That evening, I visited my mother and told her who my boss had actually been, how he had callously discarded me after using me for months, and that I wanted to destroy him as revenge for what he had done to our family. My mother, who is normally the sweetest and most gentle person you could ever meet, shocked me completely when she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Bury the bastard." With my mother's blessing and a folder full of evidence, I was ready to unleash a systematic campaign of legal destruction that would cost John nearly $2 million and leave him with absolutely nothing. No one expected that my mother's blessing to bury the bastard would launch such a perfectly coordinated destruction campaign. But Friday morning brought the beginning of John's complete annihilation as I systematically activated every regulatory agency that could possibly hold him accountable for years of illegal business practices and worker exploitation. Asterisk. Friday arrived, and I had no reason to get up early since my new job didn't start until Monday. However, my phone began ringing constantly because John was desperately trying to reach me, and it quickly became evident that his business was collapsing rapidly. Bob sent me a text message explaining that he had delivered his final invoice at 8 a.m. and walked out, leaving John completely helpless, without the institutional knowledge that only Bob possessed. But this wasn't just petty revenge. This was professional destruction on a massive scale. I had spent months preparing a totally legal but devastating campaign that would systematically dismantle everything John had built through fraud and exploitation. My first call was to the Federation Against Software Theft, where I provided detailed information about John's illegal use of licensed software on multiple machines, along with the email evidence where I had repeatedly warned him that he was breaking the law. Next, I contacted a friend at the local government health and safety team and reported no fewer than 30 separate rule violations, providing supporting photographs and videos as evidence. The 105 decibel noise levels, lack of personal protective equipment, dangerous electrical work, and numerous other safety hazards I had documented would trigger immediate investigations and potential criminal charges. I also discovered that one of Local Kitchen's professional memberships had expired, but John was still using their logo on all his paperwork, email signatures, website, company van, and building signage. This fraudulent misrepresentation was reported directly to the professional organization, adding another layer of legal trouble to his mounting problems. A week later, John sent me a message that perfectly demonstrated how completely he had failed to understand his situation. He offered to pay me $50 per day to do IT work for him, presenting it as if he was doing me a favor by throwing me this pathetic lifeline. I responded that I had previously been earning $90 per day as his employee, but as a freelance contractor, my rate was now $200 per day. He never contacted me again. 3 weeks after I had activated this legal destruction campaign, Jane, the showroom saleswoman who was the only remaining employee I respected, called to inform me that John had closed Local Kitchens and declared bankruptcy. The final numbers were staggering: $932,000 in business debts, plus $876,000 in fines from various regulatory agencies. The health and safety violations alone had resulted in a building closure that stopped all production and forced the bankruptcy. But the universe wasn't finished delivering poetic justice. By pure coincidence, I was helping a friend deliver pizzas when John placed an order to his house. My friend was driving and handling the shop work while I was responsible for going to the door and delivering the food, which meant I got to personally hand over his meal. When John opened the door, he was actually polite to me and made a condescending comment about how if I had done the extra IT work for him, I wouldn't have to be delivering pizzas. I calmly responded that it was what it was, then asked why he had only ordered one meal. Didn't his wife like pizza? His face fell as he explained that she had left him and taken the children back to her parents. And while he wasn't okay with that situation, he had no choice in the matter. That's when I decided to twist the knife even deeper. I told him it was fortunate that he had gotten rid of me when he did, because I now had a fantastic, well-paying job that I was excellent at, and if I had stayed at Local Kitchens, I would have been dragged down with him when his business inevitably collapsed. The moment he realized that I was the person who had systematically destroyed his life, he demanded to know why I had betrayed him after he had supposedly given me everything and taught me how to work in the kitchen industry. My response was simple and devastating. I gave him my parents' address and said, 2007. I watched the color completely drain from his face as he realized that his past had finally caught up with him. When I told him the pizza cost $21.50, he threw $40 at me and snatched the food from my hands before slamming the door, giving me an $18 tip from the same man who had stolen my parents' retirement dreams. Sometimes the universe hands you the perfect opportunity to serve justice with a side of pepperoni. This story proves that patience, documentation, and strategic thinking can turn workplace exploitation into complete financial destruction. When someone ruins innocent people's dreams through fraud, karma doesn't just knock on their door, it delivers their final meal before taking everything away. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button to help others find it. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And subscribe to join our community of resilient souls who've learned that sometimes being underestimated is your greatest superpower. Together, we're writing new endings to old stories, and I can't wait to share the next chapter with you.